Mara clutched the box in her pocket tightly as she walked down the sidewalk, trying to keep her pace even and unremarkable. She couldn't afford to draw attention to herself. Not today. Not when she was so close to finally achieving her goal after all these years of meticulous planning. She focused on her breathing, in and out, willing her hammering heart to slow its frantic rhythm. It was just an ordinary box in an ordinary coat pocket. No one would ever guess what was really inside. What Mara had risked everything for. What would change the world forever. Mara had almost made it to her destination when she saw the first cat. It was just an ordinary black cat, perched on a stoop, lazily licking its paw. Mara barely glanced at it as she passed by, her fingers unconsciously tightening around the box. "It's nothing," she told herself. "Just a cat minding its own business, completely unrelated to you or what you're doing. Don't be paranoid." Mara continued walking, fixing her eyes straight ahead. 3 more blocks. Only 3 more blocks and this would all be over. Then she saw the second cat, lounging in a windowsill, and the third cat, crouched under a bush. Mara quickened her pace as much as she dared. "It's fine," she repeated in her head like a mantra. "They're just cats. Coincidences happen." But coincidences didn't usually feel this unsettling, like icy fingers dancing up and down your spine. Mara shook her head, trying to dislodge the unease. She couldn't afford to get distracted or spooked. Not when she was so close. Something soft brushed against her leg and Mara nearly jumped out of her skin. Heart in her throat. She looked down to see a fourth cat winding itself around her ankles, purring. "It's nothing," Mara said out loud, more to reassure herself than anything else. "Just some friendly neighborhood cats. That's all." Her voice sounded too high-pitched, even to her own ears. Fighting the urge to break into a run, Mara stepped carefully over the cat, continuing down the sidewalk at what she hoped was a casual pace. Her palms were slick with sweat inside her coat pockets, one hand still clutched tightly around the box. Only 2 more blocks now. At the crosswalk, Mara bounced impatiently on the balls of her feet as she waited for the light to change. Her eyes drifted to the other side of the street and she froze. There, sitting on the curb directly across from her, was a 5th cat. As if sensing her gaze, the cat raised its head and stared right at her, unblinking. The light turned green, but Mara remained rooted to the spot, her heart racing. 5 cats. 5 cats that all seemed to be watching her, following her, waiting for her. "No." Mara shook her head violently. "Now you're just being irrational and paranoid. It's a busy city. There are bound to be lots of cats around. This is just your imagination running wild. Get it together." Mara forced herself to take a deep breath and stepped out into the crosswalk. She just had to make it a little bit farther and then this would all be behind her. She could already see her destination up ahead. But when she reached the other side of the street, the cat was still there, still tracking her with its luminous green eyes. Mara couldn't shake the crawling sensation on the back of her neck, the feeling that she was being stalked by some malevolent force. She veered down a side street between 2 apartment buildings, hoping to lose her feline pursuer. The narrow alley was dimly lit, the sunlight largely blocked by the tall brick walls and the laundry lines strung between windows. Mara's footsteps echoed loudly in the confined space and she winced. So much for being inconspicuous. The looming shadows seemed to watch her accusingly and she shivered, pulling her coat tighter around herself. A loud meow pierced the air and Mara whipped her head up to see yet another cat silhouetted in a window above her like a gargoyle. Her stomach twisted and she started to run, her measured pace abandoned. She had to get out of here, had to get away from all these cats and their knowing, judging eyes. Mara burst out of the alley at a full sprint and collided head-on with an old woman walking her cat, knocking them both to the ground in a tangle of limbs and shopping bags. The cat yowled indignantly and leaped free. "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, dear," the old woman exclaimed, sitting up with a wince. "Are you quite all right?" Mara barely heard her, fixated on the cat glaring at her from a few feet away. It was the 7th cat she'd seen in the span of just a few minutes. This couldn't possibly be a coincidence anymore. They knew. Somehow, they knew what she was doing and they were trying to stop her. "Is that your cat?" Mara blurted out, her voice shaking. The old woman blinked at her in confusion. "Why, yes, this is my Timothy. He didn't mean to startle you, I'm sure. Would you like to pet him? He's very friendly."
No.
"Get it away from me." Mara scrambled backward, chest heaving. She caught a flash of movement in her peripheral vision and spun around to see an eighth cat slinking toward her from behind a trash can. The panic slime was rising in her throat now, thick and choking. They were everywhere, these horrible, omniscient creatures, watching her, judging her, hunting her. She couldn't escape them. "Darling, you look positively ill," the old woman said, voice laced with concern. She reached for Mara. "Why don't you let me dash?"
No.
Mara shrieked, flinching away from her touch as if it were poison. "You don't understand. It's not just cats. It's them, the black cats. They're after me." The old woman's eyebrows shot up. "I'm not sure I follow, dear. What black cats are you talking about?" "The black cats," Mara repeated desperately, the words spilling out of her in a sobbing rush. "The secret society, the underground network. They know what I did, what I'm trying to do. And now they've sent their agents to stop me." Mara felt a scratch on the back of her leg and nearly jumped out of her skin. A ninth cat had materialized behind her, its claws snagging on her pants. A hysterical scream clawed its way up her throat but got lodged there, trapped by the panic constricting her airways. The old woman was still talking to her, trying to soothe her, but Mara could no longer make out the words over the thunderous pounding of her own heart and the ambulance-like wailing building in her head. She had to get out of here, had to escape this nightmare. Maybe she could still make it if she ran fast enough. So Mara ran. She ran like the devil himself was on her heels, and perhaps he was in the guise of 10 demon cats. She squeezed her eyes shut as her feet pounded the pavement, trying to block out the world, trying to outrun her own fear. But the claws of panic were lodged deep, turning her insides to slimy, shivering jelly. Mara had no awareness of where she was going, operating on pure animal instinct. So she didn't see the 10th and final cat until she was practically on top of it, too late to stop her momentum. Mara's foot caught on the cat's tail and she went sprawling, cracking her head on the pavement with a sickening thud. For a moment, the pain blotted out everything else, a starburst of agony exploding through her skull. Then, through the ringing in her ears and the spots dancing across her vision, Mara registered a much worse sensation. The distinct lack of a small, hard box in her pocket. It must have fallen out when she tripped. "No, no, no," Mara gasped, frantically patting herself down. This couldn't be happening. Not when she'd been so close. She spotted the box a few feet away and lunged for it desperately. But before her fingers could close around it, the 10th cat pounced, quick as a snake, and batted the box into the street. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. Mara watched in horror as the box arced through the air, tumbling end over end. She was dimly aware of lurching to her feet, of screaming something inarticulate and primal. But she was too late. The box hit the pavement with a deceptively innocent clink, and then the world exploded. A white-hot fireball consumed the street, the shockwaves slamming into Mara like a wrecking ball and catapulting her backwards into a crushing embrace of heat and noise and blinding light. She felt rather than heard the snap of her bones, like dry kindling in a wildfire. In the microseconds before oblivion claimed her, Mara managed to pry open her seared eyelids one last time. And there, amidst the roaring flames and swirling debris, she saw it, the 10th cat, sitting calmly, not a whisker singed, not a hair out of place, watching her, judging her. As the cat's luminous green eyes bored into hers, Mara finally understood the horrible truth. Far too late. The box had been a decoy, a test, and she had failed. The black cats had never been trying to stop her. They'd been trying to recruit her, but Mara had been too blind, too arrogant, too paranoid to see it. And now she would pay the ultimate price. Mara tried to scream, but there was no air left in her lungs, only fire. The wail of sirens dopplered in the distance, an ambulance arriving too late to a scene of smoldering wreckage. And the last thing Mara saw before the world tunneled to black was the cat, blink once, slowly, as if in solemn acknowledgement. Then everything faded away, like mist under a hot sun, until there was only darkness. And in that darkness, final and absolute, Mara knew the horrible truth with unshakable certainty. In the end, the black cats always win.